This is the movie I pick over Flower Moon.
Yes.
I feel like the characters are more evenly paced. I feel like you're not going to be bored.
So I think if you like legal dramas, you'll like it. If you like relational dramas, you like it. If you like... Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing Anatomy of a Fall.
Let's get started.
When Daniel discovers his father Samuel's body soon after it falls from the fourth story of their home in the Alps, his mother Sandra is suspected of murder. As an old friend of Sandra's, Vincent, decides to represent her in court, the circumstances leading up to the fall revealed themselves to be as ambiguous as the facts of the case, forcing everyone involved to make difficult decisions of what they see from their perspective.
Rebecca, this film won a ton of awards at the Cannes Film Festival. Talk about that a bit.
The Cannes Film Festival is the creme de la creme of movie festivals. If you place here, if you're shown here, the film community will take you seriously, and there's no more serious award than the Palme d'Or, aka the Golden Palm, for those of us who don't speak French. If you win this award, it's like winning the Best Picture at the Oscars, the Best Director at the Oscars, and the Best Picture at the Emmys all in one. You are a film that deserves notice.
Well, and it's pretty amazing that it won so many awards. Obviously, I'm not surprised. I really loved this movie. However, when we first saw the trailers about, a couple months ago? Actually, it feels like it might have been longer than that.
I would say about 3 or 4 months ago. That's my estimate.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about that. Other thoughts of why you wanted to see this movie?
There was just enough tease in the trailer not to give away the story, but enough to leave me hanging and start asking questions and knowing that that movie would hopefully give me some answers.
We'll talk about the answers without spoiling it, of course. But the acting was phenomenal in this.
I was really blown away just at the minimalism of the performances. The performances felt like people who had been lived in. These are characters that have clearly been spent time emotionally in mapping.
Rebecca, let's talk about the screenplay. I know I really loved it. It felt very authentic. The relationships, the conversations, even the arguments felt very genuine.
I was really impressed that the amount of detail that the screenplay allowed the performers to invent their characters. It feels very minimalist if you look at how the dialogue is said, but there's plenty of room to adapt this to a wide variety of circumstances. I can easily see this film being adapted for different language markets down the line.
Well, in the movie the languages spoken in the movie were English, French, and German, and it is a French movie. And the subtitles, I wouldn't say they were minimal, but the whole movie wasn't entirely subtitles, which wouldn't have surprised me if it would have been.
I think the thing that helps this movie is that different languages mean different emotional connotations. So it adds kind of a depth that you can find in each scene. There's also room for many different interpretations when you use these languages.
Well, and I appreciated that the main character, Sandra, she was told when she was in court to speak French. And at a different point, because she actually is from Germany originally. However, there was a little bit of German in there as well. And I appreciate that. So rather than just all subtitles or all English, I agree with you. I think that added to the depth of the movie and the screenplay.
Plus, I don't know if you noticed, there was one scene in the courtroom where not only were Sandra's words being translated in French audibly by translators.
Correct.
Also, there's a transcript of conversations being shown in French, but you were hearing it in English as well.
That's true. And honestly, the attention to detail, the screenplay, my understanding was the director and her long-term partner. So Justine Triet, I believe, is how it's pronounced in French, and her partner, Arthur Harari, have written this together. And it felt very genuine in terms of the discussion having as a couple, the argument as a couple felt very sincere. And as you said, it led to a lot of questions, meaning, were they in love? Did Sandra take her husband's life? Did she push him off the fourth floor?
Leading to the comparisons of emotional resonance, I find myself kind of reaching for Killers of the Flower Moon, ironically.
Oh, and did you want to compare the two of those, or do you feel like that there is no comparison?
In Killers of the Flower Moon, the main question you have to ask is Nellie being loved, or is she just a tool? And in this film, you have to ask, is Samuel, Sandra's husband, being loved, or is he just a tool for her own career?
And it's interesting because we just reviewed Killer of the Flower Moon just last week. Length of time, similar. This movie was 152 minutes. It's not just comparing the time frame in terms of long movie, but I like the longer length of this movie because to me it told a complete story.
I feel like the pacing was better. I had just come from a 9-hour shift at work.
Mm-hmm.
You and I in the box and some of our Cocoon cast team had just had dinner right before this movie. Mm-hmm. I noticed there was something else on the schedule for a local theater that was also showing something. And yet during the entire time that we were watching this movie, my attention was nowhere else but this movie. Let's compare that to Killers of the Flower Moon. My attention was wandering significantly, and I was trying to keep it curtailed to that movie.
Well, and it was interesting because we had seen the trailers for this movie. We had actually actively looked for this movie, hadn't seen it. It dropped on a Friday, and we went, like you said, it was like 10:30 at night. All of us had worked, had some other outside commitments till about 9:30. Ran over to the movie eating really quickly in order to see this movie. And I agree with you. I was engaged the entire movie. And if you do compare it to Killers of the Flower Moon, it felt more fluid to me. Even when they would go to court cases, they were talking with her son Daniel and, interviewing and things of that nature. So there were many different scenes, but it felt very seamless. Killers of the Flower Moon felt very choppy, vignette, and never felt fully cohesive to me.
I can see that. And if we're also going to compare Killers of the Flower Moon, I want to say, I think Sandra Hüller, along with Lily Gladstone, this is the Oscar race that I'm curious about. I think these two women, this is your best actress race right here.
Well, and I agree. The other part of it is Justine, who directed this movie. You think about Greta Gerwig, who directed Barbie. So far, 2 women, and then Sophie Coppola's movie is coming out.
That's true, Priscilla.
Correct. So this may be a really tight Oscar race coming up.
I hope it's a tight Oscar race because both of these films deserve a spotlight on them for the reasons that we've mentioned.
I agree. And let's talk a little bit more about the story. And I laugh because we talk about, we don't want to put any spoilers out. There are not a lot of spoilers. When we left this movie, there was a ton of ambiguity still there, still hanging there. In fact, I laughed because there is a resolve with Sandra's character in terms of whether she's found guilty or not. We will hold that. But at the very beginning of the movie, do you remember the website that they provided?
There's a website provided before the opening credits. It's called didshedoit.com. All you do is you vote whether it was done.
Meaning whether she killed her husband.
Whether Sandra killed her husband. And you can submit your reason why. You don't get to see everybody else's reasons. And to be clear, I visited this on my phone. So it may look different on, a laptop or a home computer setup or something like that. I'm not going to give you the percentages, so you can go to the website and vote for yourself. But it is interesting to see how the audience is experiencing this movie. And there's going to be decades easily of film critics going, this is how it happened. And it really holds a mirror to ourselves as a cinema community of how do we perceive stories? And that's a really cool thread that I love that they wove through this movie.
Well, and I know on our way back from the theater, even though we were obviously tired, it was pretty late, we were having the debate in our car. I know, obviously other cars were having similar debates, but we were having the debate as to there were equal points that were compelling that she did it, she didn't do it. And you had made a comment, do you recall what it was around? It wasn't obvious one way or the other.
I liked how it was ambiguous because you can make like you said, you can make points either way or the other, but I liked how it was very evenly demonstrated in practical ways, not just here's the evidence. It's how does this affect, and then it lets it set in the mind of the viewer.
I appreciated that because I know sometimes we've talked about the box is not a fan of open-ended movies or open-ended endings. But I didn't hear much complaint coming from the box around that. I just heard this was compelling or her attorneys were this and this. And to have something so equally divided is fascinating to me.
Well, even some people on our team who agreed with the end result came to it with different conclusions and different evidence. So I thought that was kind of interesting because, again, depending on the viewer's lens, you may interpret one thing very heavily in the narrative.
And we had done that. You and I were talking, and I know different points. I said, oh, this was this, and the conclusion I drew from this was this. And you're like, no. This is what I would say. But it wasn't an argument. It was
a discussion.
It was a discussion. And I think it's pretty great to be coming home from a movie about 1:30-ish and having these discussions, being in the movie, as you said, just being riveted to the acting was phenomenal. The young man, Daniel, I couldn't find anything on him, to be honest with you. And even how old he is or anything. But he was, I know you'd made a comment earlier in the season that there are so many great children actors right now.
We are so spoiled for kid actors this year. And I really think this is another example of being a great kid actor. In fact, I know the Oscars are like, what's a new category we can add? Best kid actor, right there. It's yours for the taking.
That would be pretty terrific. Because I agree with that. And I found that fascinating because I thought, well, maybe I'll find a little information on him. I really couldn't find much. And I'll be honest with you, each person in this movie was new to me. And I feel a little silly because maybe in our cinema community, people are like, no, I know who these people are and I've seen them for years. They're new to me. However, I would see anything any one of them were in.
And I'd like our cinema community to comment below. If you've seen any of the people in this movie, comment below. What's your favorite work of theirs? We'd love to hear about it. And we'd also maybe see a new movie that we can spotlight.
I would agree with that. I know one thing that really grabbed my attention, and definitely doing Cocoon Cast, I'm much more aware of it, is the budgets for movies. And it's granted, right? When they're talking 10, 15, 20 million dollars, I don't have an exact frame of reference. I do comparisons. But what surprised me is this budget, or this movie's budget, was $6.2 million, which is relatively low. It isn't even wide release at this point. It's still limited release. It was in France. It's coming soon to the UK and Ireland. But it's already made $10.3 million.
That's amazing to me.
To me, it's amazing as well. I was reading when it was released in France, it came in below Barbie, but above Oppenheimer, which made me laugh.
Anything that goes above a Christopher Nolan movie, you have to ask yourself, why?
Exactly. But to me, the budget was low, and it is still in limited release. When we went to see it, I believe it was playing at our local Cinemark, and there were only 3 showings that day. And my understanding is wide release is coming.
This, for me, is a must-see movie this year. This is a conversation piece. Don't get left out.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from the box?
Before I get into the question, I do want to make a comment. I'm usually not a fan of movies that just have this ending where you just don't know what happened, and it's just not too satisfying. In this movie, the ending was a good resolve, so you felt like there was some closure. However, they did a wonderful job of leaving this question open, whether she did it or she didn't do it. And they provided so much evidence on each side that you could really argue it either way. And to me, that's just a phenomenal movie. If you had to choose between this movie, Anatomy of a Fall, and Killers of the Flower Moon, and you could only see one, or you can only recommend one, which would you recommend and why?
This is the movie I pick over Flower Moon.
Yes.
I feel like the characters are more evenly paced. I feel like you're not going to be bored. I feel like this movie flows.
Yes.
Scorsese's film, it's a good Scorsese film. It's not a great Scorsese film. It's a good Scorsese film. This, to me, evenly keeps its pace, minds its characters, and keeps you wanting more.
Well, and the part that I agree with absolutely everything you said. The fluidity of this movie was compelling. The characters, and even if she did it, which who knows, right? We're like, well, maybe. But even if she did, I liked the characters more. I know for me, Killers of the Flower Moon, Lily Gladstone's character playing Molly, she was phenomenal. And I would be so surprised and frankly very disappointed if she did not receive an Oscar nomination, if not perhaps a win. However, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, I know that he was evil, but I didn't care about him.
Yeah.
I didn't really care much about Robert De Niro's character. I wasn't overly compelled or engaged the whole time.
The only other person I was really enjoying their performance was Cara Jade Myers. She played one of Molly's sisters.
That's true. That's true. But that mattered to me as well. Although I do think Killers of the Flower Moon will receive Oscar nominations. Without
it is
doubt.
being noticed this year for sure.
Absolutely. And we may be on the other side of not liking it quite as much. However, I do recognize it was a good movie for what it was. However, as the box was asking, choosing one, I would hands down choose The Anatomy of a Fall.
I'm glad we've seen both, but if I had to choose one to see again, this is the one.
Absolutely. In your thought of who do you think the ideal person or persons would be to see this? Typical Tina, average Anthony, who do you think would want to see this?
I think this is your discerning Dwayne and sophisticated Steven. You want something that you can sit in, soak in, and not have to worry about the expectations with this movie, but be prepared. This movie goes to some pretty dark places, and it is rather realistic. It takes the time and the maturity to handle these topics.
It's a smart movie. It's a very smart movie, but I don't think it's not necessarily isolating, but only, I agree with you, the discerning Dwayne and the sophisticated Steven. These are movies that I think that they would enjoy. Agreed. However, I do think
It's not inaccessible.
that's the word I'm looking for. It is more accessible. I laughed because in the movie I kind of nudged you a tiny bit that there was a bit of a Law and Order-esque feel to it. And our family, the joke is Law and Order is on reruns and on TiVos, and
This is the best Law and Order episode I've ever seen.
I just kind of laughed because it was the story and then the legal aspect of it, and not to downgrade it to a Law and Order episode. However, the formatting just kind of made me chuckle, and I believe Law and Order is pretty accessible to most people. So I think if you like legal dramas, you'll like it. If you like relational dramas, you'd like it. If you like thrillers and questions, to me, it's much smarter than like a Gone Girl type of a movie.
And that's saying something, because I remember you liked Gone Girl.
I do. And I remember the box was not thrilled about the Gone Girl movie because...
That I found amusing, because we as a family, we tend to enjoy David Fincher.
That's true. That's true. Well, anytime, the husband, is accused or something, the box tends to go, ooh, hey. Leave the box out of this. Rebecca, it is that time of the show where I have 5 moths dancing, singing. Not really this time. They're kind of afraid.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. They're afraid they may take a dive. What do you think? 1 to 5. How would you rate this movie?
This is a pretty solid 4 for me.
Wow. Okay. Number 1 reason for a 4.
It's not perfect, but it does what it sets out to do quite well.
All right. With my 5 moths flying, I would actually rate it a bit higher than you. I would say 4 and a wing. It's as you said, it does what it set out to do. It did it well. To me, it is far above average. It's not perfect. It's not a solid 5 in my mind, which would equate to it's a perfect movie all the way around. I think one part that was missing was the music for me. I know that there was some original music. The music played a part. There was music on a record player. The son was playing the piano, so that was included. But there was no soundtrack that added or enriched the movie to me. Therefore, I would have a hard time saying it's a solid 5.
And a soundtrack doesn't have to be playing through the entire movie to make it impact. Sometimes little pieces here and there can really add atmosphere to a movie. What I hear you saying is you couldn't find that atmosphere.
I couldn't find that. Therefore, I have a hard time saying let's make it a 5. But 4.5 feels very solid. Therefore, I would say I would highly recommend the movie. Thanks for joining us. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for a review of the new movie, Five Nights at Freddy's. Then come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this movie review, you might click the link to check out our review of Killers of the Flower Moon, or click the other link to watch last week's show where we reviewed Beetlejuice.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.